Offices are a total disaster. They are a capitalist fantasy of micromanagement and control. And I'm going to explain why working from home enables you to escape some of the total and absolute undignified, inhumane features of the office, and why most people should be working from home, and they should want to with their unions, and they should tell their bosses that they want to work from home. Unfortunately, after this pandemic, more and more people are working from home. But let's talk about some of the negatives of working in an office. So number one is micromanagement. Micromanagement is basically being managed to the minutiae. Sit up straight at your desk. Make sure your desk is clean. Move that over there. Wear that certain outfit for work. Make sure you're wearing a shirt which is totally uncomfortable. Make sure you're wearing work pants, not jeans or not any other type of pants that would be far comfier. Wear them type of shoes, don't wear them. Make sure you do that report. I need a report off you by Friday every week of how many customers you've called, how many lines of code you've written, how many X and X you've done. I need a report on the desk by 3 o'clock Friday. If it's not there, you're out the door. This type, never being given any autonomy at work, never being able to make decisions for yourself, having everything decided. Don't use that note system. Use a pen and paper, or use this particular note system, even if you want to use a digital system like OneNote or Notion or whatever you use to schedule your day. This type of, even in some workplaces, you're told how long you can use the bathroom for. Make sure you don't go above 3 minutes or 5 minutes. This type of control of humans is totally unnatural, totally inhumane, and totally disgusting. And unfortunately, it is in the vast majority of offices. That's not to say some offices workers can dress down, but still they are controlled to an unbelievable degree. I personally, every single office chair I've ever sat on has been a disaster, has been crap, cheap, 20 quid chair off eBay or whatever, or the local office supplier, that has been a super cheap crap chair that was uncomfortable, that didn't recline properly. When I'm sitting at a desk, when I'm doing work, productive work, I like to be leaned back. Well, I've been in offices where I've leaned slightly back and I've been told to sit up straight. This is years ago, but it still happened. When I was younger, when I'd just graduated from uni and I was working in an office. And this type of control, never being given autonomy to make decisions, being constantly told to make reports, to report what you're up to, even if that report is already, the information in that report is already contained on the computer systems that they use. They just have to look at the systems to get the information. And most systems now should be able to do a report automatically that tells you what they've actually done. But many systems in Britain, many businesses in Britain are not up to date with the latest computer systems, and they have really outdated practices. And some of them, even if they do, they still want you to physically write the report. Now, I said to some people, this information is already on our CRM system, or is already on our whatever system. And I said, you only have to do X, X and X and you can get that information of what I've been up to. And they're like, no, it's okay, just do the report still. I still want to see your input in the report. But that report might take 2 or 3 hours to produce. And do you really want me to waste 2 or 3 hours a week doing this report when I can be much more productive doing what I'm doing? And they still wanted me to do the report, even if they don't even look at it. It's about control. It's about worker control and turning you into a total atom that never asks for a pay rise, that never asks, for better conditions, to work less and so forth, just to sit there taking orders like a pathetic tool. This is why an office is a total disaster. You are never given autonomy, essentially. You're constantly controlled. you're dragged into all the office BS to do with working in a communal office, like sitting up straight, like wearing certain dress code, like having to use the same. Whereas if you're at home, you can basically wear what you want, apart from possibly on some meetings with clients where it's fine, you can put a different shirt on or whatever. But for the majority of the time at home, you could be sat there in shorts. You can lean back and sit on a completely comfortable chair, which I have. This is the new IKEA Marcus, by the way, which I believe is one of the comfiest chairs you can get. And you can have a much more better, less distracted, less noisy environment where you're not constantly being watched like a pathetic kid. So micromanagement in the offices is far, far worse than micromanagement remotely, and I know that from experience. So micromanagement is fundamentally inhumane in my opinion, because being autonomous and being able to make decisions yourself and participate and suggest, well, I have a better process we can implement, but you're not a manager, why should I listen to you? I don't care, do it my way. Use pen and paper, even though we've moved to digital systems. Use this, use that might be outdated. Well, I've got a better way of doing it, and ultimately the business should only really care about the end result. But under this system, we permit the grotesque control of staff in workplaces like children. They're treated like children, and they are monitored like they are frauds. They're monitored like they're criminals, with cameras, with everything. It is an absolute disgrace. It is an absolute inhumane disgrace. And of course, the businesses are not really doing it just because they don't trust you, although to a large degree that could be true. It's also about creating a passive, atomized wage slave, basically, that won't ask for a rise, won't ask for better conditions, won't ask for more time off to reduce the amount of hours they work, that they will just be a pathetic wage slave. That's essentially what micromanagement is ultimately about. It's about making you feel like, you are owned, you are controlled and owned in this place, and you have to know your place. It's a disgrace, and by working from home, you can escape a lot of that total BS, although it still does take place. All the stuff that's specific to the office, like sitting up straight, like sitting, like using the correct chair and all that, using the correct dress code, is completely gone from working at home. Working at home, you can sit how the hell you want, you can do what the hell you want, by and large, which is far better. As long as you're carrying out your task and getting the job done, who cares the way you sit on your seat? Who cares what clothes you wear? That's ridiculous. Number two is you can actually be more productive, and even if you couldn't be more productive, I personally wouldn't care, because I don't believe that just productiveness is the only principal value that we should be bothered about. It's not. It's also worker autonomy, and control and participation should be at the top. What is our goal in this world? It's not just to be a producer. Don't get me wrong, part of us want to produce, and we want to create things, and we want to research things, and we want to write things and create things. That's a part of being a human. But it's not just producing more and more, growing more sales, more revenue, more. That's not human. That's an unnatural thing that's been put upon us in this system called capitalism, which is based upon the profit motive, the price mechanism, supply and demand, and companies growing ever bigger and bigger. That is unnatural. We don't grow. We should be about sustainability, but that's another topic for another day. But speaking in totally capitalist terms, it is true that workers can be more productive at home, and if that is a measure that you want to value, then by that metric, we can say that working from home is more productive, because you're distracted less. Because in an office there is unbelievable distractions. There's people walking in and out of the room, there's people talking to each other, there's managers making announcements, there's everything going on in an office. The phone's constantly ringing. When you're at home, again, you escape much of that. Now, generally you will have a communication system like Microsoft Teams or Zoom or whatever it is. Most companies, I think, use Microsoft Teams. That's the company that I've more recently used. That's the platform of. And yes, it is true that is also constantly going beep, beep, beep when people are messaging each other, between colleagues and management, and that does constantly beep. But you can turn the sound down, you can turn it down. In an office, you can't turn the office down. When I worked in offices, there was only one office I worked in, and I've worked in quite a few, where I had my own actual glass partitioned room. In most offices I worked in, they were just open. Everyone sat with everyone, everyone could hear everything. Now that is a disaster. It's a disaster under capitalism that permits the control that it does. It is a total disaster, that, and it's so distracting with people constantly talking about products and about stuff. You can't concentrate. The phone's constantly ringing. You cannot concentrate properly in an office, I don't think, unless you're in your own private glass partitioned room where it's a bit quieter. It is so distracting, and people walking in and out, people coming into your room, people asking you questions all the time. You can't get anything done. And that is definitely something I felt working in an open plan office, which is the majority of the offices that I've worked in had. So I would say that you can be far more productive. It's not just that though. When you work from home, well, it depends on the company you work for, but you can have the best setup you want if you can afford it. You can have, I've got two massive 55-inch 4K displays. Yes, I did say that, 4K 55-inch displays. They're basically TVs that I use for my video editing and my professional work that I do have to do. I have a fantastic brand new computer that's a few £1,000 that is super fast and is way better than any computer setup or any monitor display setup that I've ever had in a business. In a business, I would have a 1080p crappy 22-inch or 24-inch monitor. If I'm lucky, I might have a dual screen. At home, I can have a triple screen. I can have massive TVs that give me all the desktop space I can ever want. So, in an office, it's unlikely that they would permit you to have this for total BS reasons, like it doesn't look right or something like that. Or we don't have the budget, even though giving you the budget to do it would increase your productivity to pay for that budget many times over. But these totally brain dead, short-sighted, foolish, idiot managers don't see the forest for the trees. They only look at controlling you from their perspective. They don't look at what about the overall productivity of the worker if he's permitted to have what he wants. They don't look at that, I don't think. And they are just basically mouthpieces for the senior management and shareholders that are, again, totally blindsided. And a lot of them are. That's not to say that some of the modern companies won't have managers that are less restrictive and will permit staff to have a good setup. They probably do in some companies, but in a lot of companies they won't. You'll just have a crappy computer setup, and so your crappy setup at work cannot possibly compare to a really good setup at home, in my opinion. If you do something like software engineering, working on a massive monitor using 4K at its real resolution, at its real size, where you can use all the pixels and see all the lines of code, is brilliant. That cannot be compared to working on a crappy 1080p display. It can't be compared. And so, I think that working at home, for many people, they will have a superior office setup, and they will be able to be more productive because of that fact alone. And the distractions are another main one, and the chit chatter. In offices, you chit chatter with other staff probably a lot more than you would working at home. Now, I'm not only looking at that from the perspective of capitalism, that you shouldn't be chatting at work. That's total BS. Of course you should. It's totally natural to chit-chat at work. But in terms of productivity, you know, the more time you spend chatting, the less time you're going to spend on the actual task. And so the distractions, the chit-chat and all that kind of stuff that happens at work, a lot of it is gone. And at home, you can just carry out the task much more better. And that brings me to, well, the last thing I'll say is about the computer. I've had computers in workplaces. I've been given a laptop from like 2011. I've been given super old hardware that is totally outdated, that cannot run the applications and software quick enough, that has slowed me down. In practically every company I've worked for, you know, only one company I think gave me an SSD, or no, two companies, you know, the solid state drive to run Windows from. Most of them were just on crappy hard drives. And, you know, getting an SSD from one company took about 1.5 years of asking for it. Now that is insane. I've had an SSD in my machine for 12 years, since about 2010. I mean, so that is a big one, because if you're working in an office, you're working on a computer, that's just a fact. So if you're working on a computer and your computer is slow and crap, how can you possibly carry out your task in an efficient, good manner, in a productive manner? You can't. You're hampered by it. And in many businesses, you will be using a crappy machine from 5 years ago that is slow, that can't run modern software, and that's another biggie about why you can be more productive at home, if you can afford a decent setup. Now, the next one actually benefits everyone, because this is about sick days. Now, believe it or not, I've actually never taken a sick day other than half a day. I've been lucky, and I've never taken a full sick day for being actually sick. Never. Now, that's in about 10 years of working. Well, in about 9 years of working, I've never ever taken a sick day. Now, a lot of people will not be as lucky, and they'll get a severe flu. The last time I had a flu was about 12 years ago. That was the last time I actually had true flu. I caught COVID, but I had it when I was at home, basically, so it didn't affect anything. I caught COVID 2 years ago, well, just less than 2 years ago. I didn't have any significant symptoms other than I couldn't smell anything. I had no other known symptoms, basically. I think for the first night, I shivered a little bit, but then it just stopped. And then the second day, I just noticed that I had no smell. But anyway, you know, if you work from home, you are far more likely to be able to carry out your task, you know, sitting at home in your gym jams or whatever you want to sit in, with with the necessary things that make you feel better when you're ill. You know, some people drink Lucozade, some people have a hot water bottle, whatever it is you do. I mean, if you're really ill, you shouldn't be working if you can't go. But if you've only got a bit of an upset stomach, or if you've only got a bit of a cold or a flu, and you can get out of bed and you can do the work, then you're far more likely to work and carry out that job when there's no risk of transmission to others. Like if you walked into an office with flu, you'll pass it on to everyone. Well, the chances of passing it on to other people are very high. You're not going to do that, even with a cold. Now, you're far more likely to say, well, I can continue working from home because I'm in the leisure of my home and I can carry out the task fine. So it benefits the business, and so you're far more likely to have less days off work if you work from home, if you only have a minor illness. I mean, if someone had knee surgery and couldn't use their car, even though they'd have to get taxis or the company would have to arrange some kind of transport, but it would be far easier if the person could just work from home. So I believe that people who work from home are going to overall, when it's studied overall in the long term, they're going to have worked more days and they're going to have had less sick days off, and that benefits both the business, them, and everyone really, if you think about it. If they can work, if they're truly ill, then no, they shouldn't be working, they should just rest. But I think that a lot of people that have time off work for like a flu or something, or like a cold, they would be more willing to work from home than they would in an office. The next biggie is that at home, you don't have to use communal areas. Now, one of the most degrading things about working in an office, and I've worked in quite a few, is the communal areas, or the stuff that you have to share together as a group. Now, I'm a communist and I believe that we should be sharing stuff, but under capitalism, those communal areas are controlled by bosses, and they're not properly funded, and they are crap and terrible. Communal kitchens with microwaves that don't work, toasters that don't work, with appliances without any knives and forks properly, with taps that break and don't get, the hot water tap went, or the cold water tap went, and you can only use hot. Stuff like that happens and it doesn't get fixed for weeks. Using the bathroom at work, you wouldn't believe, I'm not kidding you, in a number of businesses that I work for, you would not believe the number of times where there was no toilet roll. Where you'd go in and it'd be like a lottery as to whether there was toilet roll provided. Oh yeah, the cleaner's not replenished them yet. You'll have to go to Starbucks or Mackey's up the road. That's the kind of thing that I've seen. It's complete. The number of toilets that are just an absolute disaster, with bog roll all over the place, with doors hanging off the hinges of the cubicle, with no lock working on the cubicle, with the urinals being in a total state, with the toilets not being cleaned properly. It is a disaster. I've never heard people complain on YouTube, that I've seen a few videos about the communal areas, but they need to be complained about, because under capitalism, then the bosses don't really give a shit about them, and they're just basically crappy disasters that are just left for the office staff to fight over. And so they're not properly funded, and they're not properly maintained, and as is most of the office really. And I don't get me wrong, it is expensive probably to completely up to date all the computers all the time and that kind of thing, but the toilet has to be kept in a decent state, and you wouldn't believe the number of offices where the toilet was a disaster. And I'm sure it's even worse in places like India or Asia and that kind. It'll be even worse. And so if you like to be able to use a toilet in a nice clean way, or you want to use a kitchen with appliances that are working properly, then working from home is number one for that, because you can control it. It's your own house. Whereas in a communal area as part of the private business, chances are it will not be properly maintained, and there will be many criticisms. The number of, and I don't want to say this, but it's just, I've seen some disastrous toilets, I really have, that women would never walk into. And I'm talking about men's, because obviously I'm a man. I don't know what the women's were like, but just disgusting. And to have to use that every day is disgusting. It is absolutely disgusting, and it shows the contempt for staff. Even just like, we had a tap in one of our toilets that didn't work for probably 1 year, probably over 1 year. The tap just doesn't work. You have to go into the kitchen. It's just, this kind of stuff doesn't happen at home. You get it fixed. Whereas in work, they don't care. The bosses just leave it to be a pile of crap in a lot of places. So communal areas and kitchens that are not properly kitted out and are just very basic, old as out microwaves with crusty as out ceilings inside of it, just ugh. That's what they're like. That is what they're like. And in a lot of places in Britain, they are still like that, even in beautiful offices in bloody Canary Wharf, London, a lot of the toilets are still a total crap hole, unfortunately, and certainly in some of the smaller businesses. So, yeah, communal areas are a disaster, generally in offices. The other thing is office politics. Now, office politics, obviously, office politics can't occur, but politics at work occurs whether you're in an office physically or whether you're out of an office. It does still occur because people, under this system of dog eat dog, workers compete with one another for promotions and for bonuses and all that type of stuff, and so there is a lot of arse licking of management and all that type of stuff, arse licking of bosses, bullying, office bullying that occurs all the time. However, I've seen that it is to a lesser degree. The office politics is to a lesser degree, and the bullying, I would say, is also occurring to a lesser degree because bullying goes hand in hand with micromanagement. It's not the same, but it does go hand in hand in it, in my opinion. And so I think that a lot of the control of staff and the bullying that does occur in millions of workplaces in Britain is to a lesser degree when staff can work at home, when they're not constantly in the presence of other people that are competing against one another in this competitive system for promotions and for all the other stuff. The backstabbing, the calling of the staff, his performance is crap, he's done this, he said that, he's not done this, he's not ordered that, he's not got this sale, he's not done that work, that code's wrong. All that type of stuff, it does occur still, but not to the same degree. And so I think that a lot of people it is liberating to work from home. Even if you're an employee, ideally you would be self-employed, because ideally you want to be your own boss, because ideally you don't want to be a wage slave. You want to be a lot more independent, and you want to work for ideally, but if you can't and you work for someone, then I think working from home, you're going to find that it is far, far more liberating, far, far less office politics, far, far less bullying, far, far less, you can avoid the Machiavellian, the low empathy people. Now, it is true that in all human interaction, it is true that there is bullies. Way before capitalism, there are Machiavellians, there are bullying people that want to control, because basically these people essentially have been selected for, they're an adaptation to the environment thousands and thousands of years ago that enabled them to gain resources and survive without caring for others. So these people, even though it's a disgusting aspect of our nature, it is a natural part of our nature, unfortunately. Now, I would like to think I'm not a bully and not a controlling person in all parts of life, both at work and outside of work, but I've seen with my own eyes the most appalling, controlling, low empathy, sadistic, conniving scum in workplaces. I have seen it with my own eyes. I've seen how selfish other humans can be to one another. And I've seen it, and some of that is to do with our nature in the sense of our Machiavellianness and all that kind of thing, because of our historic genes that adapted us to do this in different times where we were in tribes and fighting with one another and so forth. And it enabled people to survive and spread their genes and gain resources which would typically have been food, but in this modern world, resources is money, to buy things, consume things. And so part of it stems from that, but that doesn't mean that we shouldn't live in a cooperative system just because there are people that have stronger Machiavellian, low empathy, sadistic genes. There are people that will rape, and that again I believe comes from genes, not the environment. And I believe that that still we should live in a communist system. But if you think about it, even if we lived in a communist system and our workplaces were totally democratic with worker control through a system of councils, through a system of one worker, one vote, and everyone voted and it had equal participation and say over decisions, you would still get people. If we did use a management hierarchical system and not flat system. I think it should be far flatter, and any coordinators should be elected. So any managers should be elected, and they should be recallable instantly if they don't carry out the mandate of the workers. That's what I believe. But if we had a system of any tier of management, the Machiavellian people that exist, even they would exist under communism, they would still bully, and they would still try and carry out their natural state, their natural way of controlling people, and gossiping and all that type of stuff would still exist, but they would be outvoted, and you would hope that not as many of them would gain those positions of control. Now, under a communist system where everything's equal, they wouldn't have more control. But if in a massive company there would be, in our workers' councils, which are made up by workers, if there was a tier of management that were elected by workers, I could still envisage some coordinators being controlling and Machiavellian and that type of stuff. And so, but you would hope that the ones that abuse their position of trust would be voted out. But under our capitalist system, we cannot vote them out because there's no structure for workplace democracy. Excuse me. So the only thing you can do really is leave the company if these idiots get in these positions, and they do. And I found that a lot of business owners, from experience, are the controlling Machiavellian type. It's capitalism promotes the bullying, controlling type. It promotes them to the top. And maybe that would also be true under a communist system, because maybe, even though they wouldn't be a top, because everything would be equalised to a large degree, because everyone has one vote still, and you can't get more than one vote. But I think that they would still control the debates in the council. They would still try and persuade others very strongly that what they want is right, and they would shout more, and they would use whatever means they can to control people, even in a completely democratised system where we don't have private companies, where everything is socialised and democratically run from top to bottom through a system of worker or consumer councils or citizen councils, whatever you want to call it. If we planned production and we didn't have this terrible competitive system, then I believe, or we did use a market system, but it was socially owned, where enterprises are completely self-managed. I still think these Machiavellian types would try and control people, but it would happen to a lesser degree than a system that actually promotes people to positions of total power, because that's what every single company in Britain is, a total dictatorship, a tyranny that's only bothered about enrichment of shareholders' wealth, unfortunately. I mean, that might be a slight overkill of it, but ultimately that's what all business is supposed to do. They're supposed to generate profit for shareholders. Workers who generate the profit are not in control. You're a worker, you generate the profit, so you should be in control. Just like you pay taxes to the government and you should be able to vote for who represents you, in workplaces, you carry out the tasks, you generate the profit, so you should have a say over that profit. And you don't, you're a slave, and that's what happens under capitalism. It is a disaster, and the more people that understand this, the more people that will fight to dismantle this disaster and to hopefully move to a largely planned economy that's built around sharing of resources, the general interest, and cooperation, and not competition and gaining wealth for getting all of self, because that is the principle that defines our current system, and it is an absolute disaster for us as workers, as wage slaves. It's a disaster for the environment because it rips up all the earth, all the minerals, all the beautiful ecology. It's turned into a commodity and is ripped up for endless profit. It turns everyone into a passive, pathetic consumer that we must consume, care about nothing but enrichment of ourselves, and enrichment of ourselves means gaining as much money, gaining as much material wealth, buying multiple houses, buying multiple cars, not caring about anything else like the environment, like giving to others, like whether the woman down the street has enough food on a table. That's what you're turned into under this disastrous capitalist system. And that's why we need a system that has the technological advancements and variety that's found in a capitalist system, even though a lot of that technological advancement, like computers, bioscience and so forth, lasers, aeroplanes, the whole high-tech economy, you know, the internet, everything, even though all that came from the state sector, you're not allowed to know that, by the way, but it did. It was originally all found in the state sector, then passed across to private companies like IBM, Microsoft, who privatized it all and then made profits off it. But you're not allowed to tell people that a lot of the technology in smartphones and so forth came from the state sector first. You're not allowed to say that, but that is the truth. But anyway, that's another video. We want a system that maintains technological advancement, that gives us better standard of living, but equalises all decision making, and furthermore gives power and control to workers or to citizens, because you would like to think the economic and political spheres become one eventually, that makes people understand that their work should also be democratic, not just their voting once every 5 years for a politician. But I've blagged on a bit then. Ultimately, working from home under a capitalist system enables you to escape quite a few of the disasters of the office. Do it now, work from home. It is better, trust me. You will never go back to an office.